everybody. Thank you so very much for swinging by and for hanging out with us today on TLC Presents Todd-versation. I am stoked for this conversation today. Literally, I'm as fired up as a one-eyed cat staring at two rat holes right now for this guest, because this is exactly what this platform is all about. This platform is about positivity and uplifting, and this guy is absolutely that. He's a doer. He's been yelled at in the finest arenas across this country. He's motivated. He's a dad. He's purposeful. He believes you perform better when you think better. He's a master of mental witchcraft. Please give it up from Think Better, Perform Better, my friend, Tommy Short. Welcome, my brother.
Todd, how you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
Oh, dude, it's absolutely my pleasure. I'm so pumped about this today because I love talking positivity. I love the uplifting conversations. I love driving success into brands and into people. And you do that, man. You are like that lifeline that we need out there today in the world. This common sense approach to controlling our destiny by controlling what's in between our ears. Whether you're in sales leadership or, your personal life, whatever it might be, but mindset is everything, right? And it's people need to get away, and especially in business, it's not about the PO all the time. It's not about the sales numbers. You can get into that trap, but if your shit isn't together between the ears, baby, it doesn't matter what your brand is anymore. So, as you say, you perform better when you think better. So I am stoked you're here, man. Really, I am.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm excited to dive into the conversation. Always get fired up to talk with like-minded individuals and share what I've learned along the way.
Well, it's going to be fun because you've got a great career. I mean, let's throw a little bit out there. Division I referee, which I'm going to get into a little bit and hear those war stories and see what the hell I get you to say publicly. But really, your business is phenomenal because you're really about uplifting people and trying to get people fired up. And I believe in, and what I preach and talk to my kids, and it's kind of cool because they say it back to me. I was all about effort and attitude, right? That's kind of what my mantra was with them. And I think you'd agree that that's, pretty important, right? And I believe that the right attitude absolutely affects the outcome of your effort. And so I want to get into this, man, deep and hard. So give me just a little background for everybody, of your journey and where you are sitting here today, sitting here hanging out with me.
Yeah. Well, you just touched on something. And you said we can jump around, so I'm gonna fire right into this.
Go, baby.
One of the things you had mentioned, like sales leadership or business, whatever. A lot of times, obviously, as leaders, we want better results, right? But
sure.
we can't change results. We can't manage results. We can help people that will eventually affect the results. But there's one thing I always say to whether it's a coaching individual, a coaching client, a team I'm working with, or if I'm speaking to a sales team. If you, a simple exercise with all those people that I listed was on the left-hand side in a typical day, list everything you don't control, right? So whether you're in sales, it's a prospect not returning an email, you call someone, a client or someone else, and they're having a bad day, so they don't respond well. You don't control the past, you don't control, maybe what your quota is going to be if you're in sales, and you go down the list, right? If things you don't control. And then on the right hand of the list, I'm like, now write down the things you can control. And here's my filter. And I love it. You said effort and attitude with your kids. Here's the filter. And I use this in officiating. I use this in coaching now. To me, there's only 3 things you can't control. And you hit 2 of them. And I say ACE because I like to keep things simple so you can remember it. Attitude, confidence, and effort. And really the filter for me was stick your hand out, because I got this in officiating. If you stick your hand out, if it's beyond your physical reach and you can't change it in a second with your action, you don't control it, right? So that's a pretty easy filter. And a lot of times people worry about all the things on the left-hand side of the sheet, the things we don't control. And that's where we spend our time worrying. That's where our thoughts are. That's where our fears are. And we sit and ruminate in our feelings about what's not going right over there. But really, if all we did was focus on those 3 things I mentioned on the right side that we can control, how much different can it be? And I'm not saying the results are going to change overnight, but that's how you change the results with your actions. And it starts with your attitude, your confidence, and your effort.
100%. And then, too, I think people get into this place when they get a little off kilter from that mantra, they get that dread thing going on. Like, I'm dreading this, and all of a sudden, all those negative voices just start to overwhelm you. And it's so funny, people think, oh, I don't listen to my inner voice and I've got all the strength, and bullshit. We all listen to our inner voice, and our inner voice has two ways, 2 volumes. It's either positive or it's negative. That devil on each shoulder, you got the devil on one side, God on the other side type of thing. And it's a tough thing to overcome. And the more you listen to that negativity, the stronger that negative voice gets. Let's be honest. It's easier to become negative than it is to become positive in a lot of ways.
100%. And I would even say, to your point, I'm not sure everyone realizes that they do talk to themselves. Like truly, like they don't understand two things. One, that they're talking to themselves, but then two, how far down the rabbit hole they go with that conversation. And then they don't realize that they can actually reframe and change the conversation in their own head. But it all starts with awareness. Like you can't change anything you're not aware of. I think a lot of us don't understand how powerful the self-talk is and how that's really the catalyst for any change.
Well, I think about the guy, I can't think of it. It's escaped me and I'll have to go fact check it out. But the book where the guy sits there and asks people in the seminar, he says, how many people talk to themselves? And about 30 people, about 30% of the room raise their hand. And the guy looked back and goes, well, you other 70% just made a decision in your mind not to raise your hand. So you talk to yourself all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Trevor Moab, he actually just passed away.
Thank you.
It takes what it takes.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for letting. Yeah. So look, I want to get into the officiating thing, which is going to be fun. But I want to table that because we're on a roll already. I want to stay in this positivity thing.
Let's go.
Right. Let's do it. So my backdrop means a lot to you. I know that. And what it says treat each day like the first. And you're talking about empathy and authenticity and being childlike and having some humility. Can you touch a little bit about why this is so important to you? And then we're going to dive into what's between your two ears right now.
Yeah, so this was a values exercise I did with my coach. And, you start with like a list of 100 values and, you circle 25 and you're trying to figure out really what this is kind of like a beacon, a North Star for me that really keeps me on track each day and something that I can focus on. Obviously, if viewers are watching, they can see I'm wearing it right now, but others, if you're just listening. But really what that is too, if you think back, Todd, whether it's, first date you had with your wife, first day at a new job, right? Like we show up different, right? Like we don't have any expectations. Truthfully, people don't really expect a whole lot from us. We probably show up a little bit early, right? We're willing to go out of our way for others. We're willing to do more than is asked. And so I just kept thinking, what if we did treat each day like the first day? Easier said than done, right? Because we get in, after maybe that 90-day honeymoon phase, then it's like, oh, we kind of take things for granted. But in my mind, I was like, how would we show up? And it's a conscious decision, back to attitude and effort, right? What would happen if you treated each day like the first day? And then as you mentioned, the reason each is capitalized, because those are my 4 core values. So I know that if I tap into empathy, if I tap into authenticity, if I tap into a childlike with curiosity and just enjoying every moment and trying to figure things out, and then humility to tell myself, I don't have all the answers and that's okay. But yeah, that's a big part of me. That's a big part of who I am. And that's the mentality and the mindset that I have every day is treat each day like the first day and show up. Choose how you show up every day.
I love that. Well, honestly, but of the 4, what do you think is the hardest for an individual to actually grasp in a day? Between empathy. Yeah, that's what I was going to, I was going to say. Easily. I was torn. I thought empathy and I thought maybe humility is another one too, especially in business, right? Because so much in business starts to be driven by ego and pride in a lot of ways. And as you start to stumble on your pride, you start to get that ego in front of you. That's always an ass kicker, especially as far up, higher you go up the corporate ladder, the bigger the ego has a tendency to get. The ego of a CEO is not necessarily the ego of a guy working in the warehouse. And it's because of the trajectory that they're on.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you, Todd, the thing about empathy that changed for me, it started in officiating. It started with a conversation I had with Brad Stevens, who at the time was at Butler. And it really grew out of frustration on my end because I couldn't understand how coaches, which seemed distant or which seemed there was no consistency to when they blew up. And so I was having a conversation with Brad. This was during the summer. I think I was helping out at one of his practices, or maybe I ran into him at a summer camp or something. But I was just like, hey, Brad, and he's at Butler at the time. I'm in Indy. So just, being around him, help me understand, and I'll give you kind of the 30-second summary. Help me understand what's going on and why do some of you guys blow up? It seems like random. And so we're having this great conversation. And he says, Tommy, do you understand what we go through on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And I really didn't. Right. So I kind of had to swallow my pride. And I was like, no. And so, he's like, we're recruiting 14 to 18-year-olds. We're essentially babysitting 18 to 22-year-olds. We've got to answer to our AD, our president, alumni, boosters, some sort of media obligation, apparel, depending on how big of of a contract they have with the school. They've got to manage their assistant coaches. Oh, by the way, if they're not at a game or recruiting, they're probably at practice, which means they don't see their family. So he's like, we've got all of this going on in our world. So during a game, when something happens, it's really kind of the accumulation or the release point of all this stuff going on. And I'm like, I get it. It makes perfect sense. And that's when I understood, right? No different in sales. Like when a coach, 9 times out of 10, when they got upset with me, it wasn't at Tommy, the ref, it was at the striped shirt, but I couldn't separate who I was from what I was doing. And in sales, a lot of times, whether it's a prospect or a client, like they're not mad at us. Maybe they had 4 or 5 shitty calls earlier in the day and you're number 6. And it has nothing to do with you. You could have had the best, conversation or pitch or whatever you were going to say in mind, but it really doesn't matter because of what they've already experienced. And then the second thing I'll add, and I would encourage all of your listeners and viewers to go on YouTube and find this. And I watch this at least once or twice a week. Just type in Cleveland Clinic Empathy. And it's about a 4-minute video. And all it is, Todd, there's no spoken word. And it's just a video and it goes around the hospital and it's professionally done. And it's going around the hospital and it's like, one scene, there's a older gentleman getting wheeled in and the words on the screen, like, just got diagnosed with cancer. And then they go to an elevator and this guy's smiling, just found out he's going to be a dad for the first time. Then they go. So the whole point of the story is you never know what people are going through, right? Like, and if you don't understand what people are going through and understand the reason that they're doing something is, swallow your pride, get rid of your ego. It's not necessarily you. That's kind of the release point. So that completely changed how I approach every situation, whether it's my individual coaching, when I'm speaking to a group, understanding that those salespeople, they've got a lot of pride, they've got a lot of ego, they're bringing a lot of hubris into this room. And so I understand like their guard is up. And so a lot of times I'll just call the elephant out in the room. Like I understand this is the last thing maybe you guys want to be doing for an hour is sitting here listening to someone, but I might have a few things that you can take with you and the rest, just get rid of it. So I think empathy, that was a long-winded answer, but I think it all starts with empathy. Yeah.
No, 100. It absolutely. I think it's so important, and I think too, when you think about it in the business world, and let's just talk about sales. We'll just stick to that topic. Yeah. But, when sales folks are driven by a bottom line number that they have to obtain, they lose focus on actually being themselves and who's on the other end of the phone. When it becomes solely a numbers game, I share a story. I got a text last night from my son who had his car into the dealership, right? And just getting whatever 35,000, whatever mile oil change it turned out. This guy sent a laundry list of things that he had to get done. That was like $5,000 of repairs on a brand new truck. It's like, give me a break, right? And it was just about hustling, right? It was about making that quota, making that number, things you didn't need to have done, right? They were saying you got to get done. And that becomes a really dangerous mindset because you start to lose focus on the fact that individuals always end up making a decision, right? I don't care what the numbers tell you. Somebody's pushing the button to generate a PO. Somebody's calling somebody to put an order in. Somebody's at the other end of all these phone calls. And it gets really dangerous when we take that human aspect out, right? That stuff in between your ears out of the business model. It's very dangerous in my opinion.
100%. Yeah. I mean, and just think about how different that conversation would have gone if the service individual or whoever was reaching out to your son and just said, hey, look, I know you're just coming in for 35,000 check. Like the last thing you want is, a laundry list of other things that need done. But, if at any point you want to chat about, X, Y, and Z, I'm happy to help. Like that conversation lands a lot different than, hey, here's 17 other things you need done. It's like, all right, get out of here.
9 things on that list. And there was shit that needed to be done. Like, I didn't even know your car had that. And at this many miles, it's fucked up. It's like, come on, hustle somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Well, so let's get in between a little bit. I want to get a little bit deeper in like how you got to, to where you are today and this level of positivity. So what were the circumstances that allowed you to develop your strong mindset? Where'd it come from? Because you didn't wait, you didn't pop out of the womb going, let's go kick the world's ass, right? You got to work into that a little bit.
Yeah. I think I would take you back to about 6th grade and really how I got into officiating and where I am today. I had a bad attitude. I was the entitled kid. I was the kid that had all the answers, especially on the basketball court. And that year, Todd, I probably had 14 or 15 technicals, but I always appreciated that's my claim to fame. I always appreciated the officials who would at least come over and talk to me. I didn't hear anything they said, because I'm 12 years old and I understand how the world works. I've got everything figured out. But that always stood, and there was never like one particular conversation, but I always appreciated the officials that would come over and talk. And I said, you know what? Like, that'd be really cool to do one day. Fast forward after my freshman year at Dayton, I had some family friends who were high school referees, and like anything else, success leaves clues. I knew that was a place to start, but I knew I wanted to at some point pursue the college and NBA level. Spent 10 years Division I, FIBA, traveling overseas to referee, and then really it was towards the last probably 3 or 4 years in my Division I career, I realized, there were some games where I was like, everything was smooth sailing. I felt like I was on top of it. I felt like my mind was in the right place. I felt like I was nailing calls. And then I felt like other games, like my confidence wasn't there. I'd worry about too much shit in the past, or I'd start worrying about the future. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. There just has to be. I didn't know anything about sports psychology. I didn't know anything about mindset. I didn't know any of that 5 years ago. Like, I know none of this, what I know now. But it was coming from a place of I wanted to be a more consistent performer, and I didn't want to rely on just my God-given talent, because I knew there was another level of getting better. And I think just from a young age, always from my parents, of like, how can you get better? Like, there's never a ceiling. Like, always look to improve. So I credit my parents for that. So I wanted to get better. I wanted to become a more consistent performer, and that led down to discussions with sports psychologists. That led down to discussions with coaches. I've always had coaches, always had a sales career in conjunction with my officiating passion. And so as I started to have kids, as my officiating career was continuing to increase, but the travel was too much. I knew I didn't want to miss kids' activities, even though they're still relatively young. I saw the writing on the wall. So I said, how can I take everything that I learned on the officiating court, combined with all the experiences I had individually with business coaches, and really morph the two and help whether it's referees, whether it's sales executives, whether it's leaders. So really taking everything I had learned in the last 10 years on the court and with my experience in coaches, now let's package that into my own kind of coaching package and speaking, and let's take that as kind of the new route. And that's how I ended up where I am today.
Yeah, I love it. It goes back to being, each day, right?
Each day.
That each day moment. Yeah, for sure. So tell me, just so to kind of frame it a little, what is a strong mindset? Well, how would you define that?
This episode of Todd-versations is brought to you by Merrifield. Better for you brands. Always rewarding. Find out how you can save time and be rewarded as you shop with Merrifield.com.
Yeah, I would say having a strong mindset is recognizing that adversity is coming at some point, having tools and systems in place to know that perfection doesn't exist, but making progress is attainable. And so having these tools, whether it's self-talk, which I think is the foundation of everything, having a process over an outcome mindset focus, how quickly you can overcome little losses. I call them little losses. So in officiating, it's a missed call, it's a coach blowing up at you, it's your partner missing a call. How quickly you can overcome those with self-talk is going to dictate how fast you succeed. So in sales, it could be how quickly you get over someone hanging up on you, a client saying they're not going to renew their contract, your boss doing X, Y, and Z, but how quickly you can bounce back from little losses is going to dictate how fast or how far you want to go. So to me, that it's all encompassing. There's not a short answer, but it's having that resiliency, and it's like anything else, right? Like you had kind of joked earlier, I didn't come out of the womb like this. No one does, right? Like these are all skills and traits that can be learned, right? I always joke, no kid in the history of the world has ever stopped trying to walk at a young age. They fall down, they get back up, and they figure it out. But for whatever reason, as we get older, we have all these self-limiting beliefs that we develop, whether it's from parents or coaches or mentors or siblings, of things maybe that they didn't accomplish, or they want because they didn't accomplish their dreams. They're like, hey, Todd, don't do that. Don't go out of your comfort zone. So then we kind of adopt these as kids and adolescents, and it's like, no, that's BS. Like everything that's self-limiting, because we're not born with any beliefs, are things that we choose to believe ourselves, whether we realize it or not. And so to me, it's developing all these skills, all these tools, having things in place so that when things don't go, because none of this, Todd, is for when, you have a great day in sales and things are like, everyone knows how to handle that. Well, for the most part, it's when you get in a slump, right? It's when things aren't going well. How quickly can you bounce back? How quickly can you put that behind you? Easier said than done. No doubt about it, but they're all skills and things that can be learned over time.
But it's incredibly necessary to be able to almost, and I want to say, put it in its own little box, because I think that is a little dangerous too. But you've got to be able to discern the difference between that moment in time and how that moment in time affects the next moment in time. And when you talk a little bit about little kids, this is such a great analogy, because when little kids have so much freaking tenacity in them, right? To your point, they're not going to they're going to continue to figure out how to walk. We're not going to do it. It's just like, how fast can we do it? And you see that when they're young, and it's amazing how instincts inside of us that you could see in that size, at that age of a child, we lose that 30 years down the road. Those instincts we take out of ourselves, that hunter-gatherer mentality that got us this far on this planet, is so far removed, from our, but it's actually inside of our DNA.
Yeah. It's how we're hardwired. But like I said, whether it's parents or teachers or mentors, maybe they didn't achieve their goal. And so, you say you want to do something like this and they shoot you down. Well, we're so, we absorb everything so much as kids. And it's like, well, if Todd told me not to do that, I probably shouldn't do that. And then that just becomes a negative feedback loop that we just keep feeding into. And but you're right. Like, we're hardwired to achieve and to want to try things. And then over time, it kind of, that fire is
the doubt, self-doubt, fear of missing out. What is somebody going to say? I'm not a risk taker. Look, I tell people all the time, jumping out of an airplane, that's really cool, especially if you have a parachute. But, but honest to God, leaps of faith, individual leaps of faith for people to take that step, to make a job change, to believe in yourself, to do whatever those things are. Those are more inspiring and more meaningful, in my opinion, than people that, that do some of these crazy stunts, jump, whatever it might be. Internal leaps of faith are really powerful.
Yeah. I think, and to touch on that, and that's one of the reasons I decided to go out on my own about 5 months ago, with being, one of my core values, authenticity. Because I tell my wife, like, how can I talk to people about being authentic if I don't take this leap of faith? And I don't say this to impress your listeners. I left 2 6-figure careers to start my own business with 2 young kids. I don't think anybody out there would advise or encourage that, but I was like, there's never going to be a perfect time. There's never going to be, everything in line. I'm like, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? You know what I mean? So I'm like, burn the boats. It doesn't matter. I've always been one to bet on myself. That's how I, got ahead in officiating. That's how I've succeeded in previous things that I've done. And I was like, now's the time, right? There's never a perfect time. So it's right now.
100%. And I love that. And, and great setup for my next question is that, I want to talk a little bit about what you created 5 months ago, because you and I have talked a couple of different times. We've gone back and forth a little bit, and I know the leap of faith story we shared that last time we were together, and it's I love it. Right, I've done it. It's great. It's empowering in a lot of different ways, and it translates across a lot. But you started this business, Think Better, Perform Better, and you're out now going around the country, speaking to businesses. You're speaking to basketball. You're speaking to sports. You're speaking to all kinds of people about this very subject. So just, give us a little 411 on your business and what it is that you're out doing.
Yeah. So you hit it right on the head. About half the time I'm speaking. And that's the thing I enjoy about this. With officiating, I was basically gone 4 straight months, grinding, early morning flights every day, hotels. Now, in starting my own business, positives and negatives, but I'm more selective in when I travel, how frequent I travel. That's the really nice thing. So just a little caveat there, but about half the time I spend speaking to groups, and sometimes that has led to individuals saying like, hey, loved what I heard, like, how can I get more? And then the other half of my time, I'm coaching individuals. So mostly executives, VPs, sales leaders, individuals who are actual contributors or producers. And I get a lot of the analogy I use. I can't remember if I've shared this with you before. Like, speaking's great. I love it. It's the closest, like, the one thing I've missed from officiating is like, and I'll never be able to replace that 2 hours. I can't describe it enough. The 2 hours on a court when you only have two other people that give a damn about you, and you've got 10,000 people who hate you. And then at the end of the night, half of them only hate you a little bit less because their team won. But I can't describe that feeling. Like, it's so exhilarating. Like, I got butterflies up until my last game. It's unbelievable. But to me, speaking is only the closest and it's about 50%. Like, I prepare, I film all my speeches so I can go back and like, what would I have tweaked or what can I lean into? Yeah, exactly. So like, that's my preparation coming into it. But so outside of speaking, the analogy, I don't know if I shared with you or not, Todd, and I say this to anyone who asks me to come in and speak, certain questions I'm going to ask, like, why now? Why me? What have you done in the past? What are the expectations? If you're coming in expecting me to change your culture in an hour, you're going to be disappointed because that's not going to happen. So the analogy I use, especially with sales teams, and it helps if the sales leader plays golf or understands it. I say, the difference between speaking and coaching, happy to come speak, but paying me, to come in and speak is like going to pick up a golf magazine at the airport. It costs about $6.99. And depending on your level of ability, some things are not going to stick because you already knew that, but some might. But you're not going to expect to lower your handicap from a $6.99 Golf Digest. Now, if you really want to make a dent in your handicap and really improve, you're going to go hire a swing coach. And I said, so that's the difference. Now, the coach is going to be more expensive. You're probably going to take a couple steps back before you make a couple steps forward. So that's how I like to relate speaking and coaching. And it gives people a pretty good idea of the two. So love speaking, but the true fulfillment, Todd, is from the one-on-one coaching and seeing where you start with somebody in September. And even now, in December, how much progress they've made in only a short amount of time work. That's where I get the most fulfillment, to see where someone is when we start working together and where they make progress, because that's where I can really make a difference. An hour speech is, and I don't have any misconceptions that I'm going to come in and change someone's life, but maybe I'm the catalyst. Maybe they've been thinking about some things I've said, and now I'm the second or third time that they've heard it. And so I do acknowledge that they might hear that the second or third time, and that kind of sparks a change. But I don't have any misconceptions that I'm going to come in and completely change someone's life.
Well, I say this all the time, and I'm sure by the time we wrap up our conversation today, you'll hear me say it one more time. I'm all about the word inspiration, about going out and inspiring somebody, right? And saying hello to somebody, saying good morning to somebody is a source of inspiration. We don't think of it at that level, right? We think it's got to be this all grandiose thing. So, and to kind of come around what you just said a little bit, putting a spark, getting somebody to think, getting somebody to take a moment of pause and contemplate a thought that you put in them, especially around the words positivity and empathy and humility and all these other things, is a powerful tool. And the problem I think a lot of people probably have in the business world is they don't think they need you, right? I'm already this person. I know who I am. I'm, Tommy Toughnuts, or I'm running around doing whatever it might be. It doesn't fucking work, man. Getting a reset back in the business world and on your life is not a bad thing. And, a lot of times people get that reset during a tragedy. Something tragic happens, a death, whatever it might be, a bad test result, or whatever the case may be. That's not the time to have those resets, because you're not going to learn from that reset, right? That becomes a whole nother problem. It's that preparedness that you put people into to take these challenges on and have that moment of say what you want, calming down your inner bitch in a lot of ways, right? And I know that's something that's super important. So in looking at what you do and being a fan of what you do and reading, doing my Stockerazzi stuff and getting you on here because I love what you're all about, you teach folks how to think and how to think stronger. And so areas that I kind of want to talk about, if we can, I got 5 of them in front of me, and I'll go back. I'm going to read it. I'm going to throw them all out at you. We can go at them one at a time, how you want to take it, which is improve your self-talk, become aware, increase your focus, how to deal with setbacks and rejection, and do boring better. And I want to keep that one for the end because I love that one the most. But let's talk about, improve your self-talk. Again, that inner bitch in your head is so dangerous.
Yeah. And before I forget, I want to touch on one thing you had just mentioned, and you said, some individuals, especially in the business world, will come in and think, I've got this all figured out. What can I learn? Excuse me. I think if nothing else, in working with our men's Olympic team for 6 years, the first time I ever interacted with that team, I two things I took away that I'll have with me for the rest of my life, and changed how I think about getting better. Number one, I realized even at the top level, there's no ceiling, right? Like there's guys, even at the top, like the truly elite, even on that Olympic team, there was 3 or 4 guys who saw practice, right, as a way to perfect the craft. The game was the game, right? Like that was, but you get into the business world and it's the complete inverse, right? Like there's no practice and all the attention is on the performance. Like, can you imagine if a sports team like didn't practice and all they were worried about was the game, and then like bitch and moan about the game? So that the first takeaway was always looking to improve, and there's never a ceiling. And then the second part was the practice piece, right?
Yeah.
Like practice is so much more important in your preparation and how you. I mean, one of the first things I ask any new client, and then we'll jump into the list you rattled off. Is like, tell me about your process. Like, how do you prepare? And I simply leave it at that, because I want to hear in their words, and if you get the blank stare, that kind of tells you a lot, right? Like, what do you mean? Like process, or
prepare for what?
Yeah. Because we all, that's kind of the meaning behind the name. I thought about back to all my performances as an official, and every time I performed better, I was thinking better. And then the kind of play on words is like, when it's time to perform, you don't have time to think. It's just act. Because if you're thinking during the performance, you're done. I don't care if it's a one-on-one with your boss. I don't care if it's a board meeting, a leadership meeting, whatever your performance is. We all have a performance, but I always thought back to the really good performances that I had, and there was a clear line of thought going into it. But when it came time to act, it was acting. There was no time for thinking. And I got it from the Navy SEALs, because they say you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to your level of training. But so often in the business world, there's no preparation, there's no preparedness. It's, I learned this 20 years ago, and that's just the way we've always done it. So I'm so fortunate and grateful that I got to be around our Olympic team and really have those 2 principles instilled in me. Like, always look for room to improve, and give practice way more attention and preparation than the performance. Because if you're focused and you go hard in practice, like the game or your performance, that's going to be a natural byproduct.
So, you made me think about, going to some business meetings and with folks, and you go and you meet somebody, and you're flying into wherever, and you're having a meeting with whomever, and they whip out that deck of information. That deck is, 41 pages of just absolute bullshit. And it's just like, you're never going to get to it, blah, blah, blah. And I adopted early in my philosophy going out. It's like, if you're going to put a deck together, it's 4 slides. And if you don't get to them, you've actually had a better meeting.
100%.
Right? Yeah,
100%.
So it's that prepared, to your point, it's that preparedness, that learning from experience of like, hey, wait a minute, this is not, yes, you want to go into battle with every bullet you possibly can carry, but in the same token, it just makes a very heavy load in a lot of ways.
Well, and if you think about that too, Todd, like if you're going in with a 41-page deck, who is that meeting about?
Well, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like people are naturally gonna ask, like, okay, Todd, tell me how do you do what you do, right? Like that's going to come out at some point. But I think if you go in with this preconceived notion of like, hey, I know everything already, it's kind of like, I always write down before every coaching session, and I think, and this kind of leads into self-talk, but I always write down, even with clients I'm coaching, or a potential client, be interested, not interesting. Like I always write those 4 words at the top, because again, just the mindset I want to get into is like, ask better questions, really listen and lean in and understand like why they might be saying something. And that kind of ties into the self-talk, right? I was just having this conversation with someone the other day. Confidence is 100% associated with your self-talk. To me, you don't need prior success to have confidence, right? Because every time you perform, you're not going to win. So if you're not going to win every time, does that mean you can't be confident every time? Right? Like I've never started a business before. I've never been an entrepreneur. Does that mean I'm not going to have success in this endeavor? I've done successful things. Prior success is not required though. It's 100% tied to the quality of your self-talk, the frequency of your self-talk, and how you're able to reframe that conversation in your head when those negative thoughts pop up, when that critic comes up and says, Todd, you can't do that. You've never done this. How are you going to do it now? Your ability to A, recognize that, B, reframe that conversation, and then refocus and change your self-talk is 100% to me, the definition of confidence.
Yeah, I love it. You spark something in me, and I teach this to people all the time. It's like, if you go into a meeting and you've got an hour with whomever that buyer, whatever that person is, my goal in every meeting was to talk an hour and 15 minutes, to keep the conversation rolling, not in the deck, but to keep the conversation rolling, only to make the guy behind me have less time to sell his shit than I was doing, right? That was always my strategy. I always was the meeting that ran over because I kept them talking. We kept, because you need to be engaged with people. You need to understand who they are as individuals. If you're just going to go, you're going to go hawk this Sharpie, there's more to life than that Sharpie. And that person that's on the other end of that conversation has more to tell you than just this Sharpie. And it's important to remember that. I love too about the self-talk. I mean, again, it's all about what's inside. Talk about becoming aware. That's one I thought was really interesting to kind of touch on, when you think about that. Yeah,
I would say, I think I mentioned earlier, like we can't change anything we're not aware of.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like awareness is everything. I was reading a study, I think in like Harvard Business Review, but they said, which I thought was astounding, but the more I interact with people, I'm pretty convinced it's probably accurate. Excuse me. It said 85% of leaders, business leaders, and so I don't know like what level that includes, it said 85% are not, like they lack self-awareness.
Yeah.
Right? And that could be from everything from how you carry yourself to what you say, to how you interact with people, to how you lead your team. And so to me, awareness, and I think with me, it really started with meditation, right? Becoming more mindful. There was a thing I used to do in officiating. I still do it today, but I would do mindless activities to become more mindful. And I'll give you an example. So during a timeout at a game, you've got all these people yelling at you, maybe a coach is heated with you, players are upset, right? Like there's all this noise, external and internal. And so what I would do is I would look up and I would just read banners during the 2-minute timeout, because you can only do one thing at a time. There's no such thing as multitasking. You're only doing one thing at a time. And so if my mind is in the present moment by reading the banners of where my feet are, right? Be where your feet are. That's going to help me come back to the present moment, because in the present moment, that's the only place that high performance happens. It doesn't happen in the past and it doesn't happen in the future. But half the time of our lives, we're spent worrying about what did I screw up on yesterday or last week or 10 minutes ago, or we're worried about what's Todd going to think about me after we end this call? What's my boss going to think of my sales performance last month? We're always in one of two places. But if you're in one of those two places, especially in officiating, in sales as well, like you can't be in the present moment. And if you're not in the present moment, you're going to make mistakes. And so that was 100%. A way to increase my awareness. One small example to become more aware. And then little things like you're walking into Starbucks, what do most of us do? We pick up the phone, right? God forbid we should talk to a stranger or interact with our surroundings. But here's a great thing, 30 seconds when you're walking like from your car to order food, just observe things that you see and call out what you see. That helps increase your awareness. Like there's a white car, there's an older couple walking. I wonder what they were doing earlier today. So just taking 30-second bite-sized minutes here and there to enhance and increase your awareness dramatically changes everything in your conversations, in your relationships. It helps increase awareness in everything that you do on a daily basis.
I love that. You said something so powerful in that, and that's know where your feet are. Right. And I think it's important to remember that in order to be grounded, you have to start with your feet. Your feet are grounded to this earth with gravity for a reason, right? So lean into it a little bit more and recognize that. That's brilliantly said. And what a great message for young people today to hear, right? And to your point, we have these phones. Our world is so fast and out of control, and quite frankly, we're not emotionally stable enough yet as human beings to deal with as fast as this phone and these technologies are coming at us. It's just not, it's not in us yet enough to be able to deal with it all in a lot of ways. So to remember your feet on the ground, I love that, dude. That's huge right there. That one I'm gonna throw back out. I'm stealing that one from you. I'm gonna be giving you credit. I'll give you credit, but I'm gonna use it.
I didn't come up with it either. Another thing I do, Todd, that has helped tremendously too with not only awareness, but being mindful. And I did this when I started this back when I was in sales, and people were like, how can you be in sales and do this? And I was like, I'm not a fireman or policeman. I'm not in emergency situations. But what I did was I still to this day, I've turned all notifications off on my phone. I don't receive one notification during the day, not from a social media app, not from ESPN. I don't get emails. I don't get notified of missed calls. I don't get notified of text messages. I have no notifications. If I want to know any of that, I have to physically open the app and look at text messages or phone calls. I'll tell you what it does though. And it really started from no phone, and something I still do, no phone for the first 2 hours when I wake up. Because so often, right, we wake up and we reach for news.
Well, most people have them laying next to them in bed.
Correct. And the first thing that we read, I don't, but most people will read either like the news, and that's usually not positive, an email of, hey, Todd, I asked for that report. Like, have you got it? Like, it's usually not positive what you're seeing.
Right.
And then you go down rabbit holes of looking at social media or whatever. And I just decided I'm not going to start my day by reacting to what everyone else is doing. I'm going to respond, and I'm going to dictate how my day starts. And I'm going to decide, make a conscious decision of how I want to start my day. And so that, those two things, no phone for the first two and no notifications on my phone, have completely changed how I show up, right? We talked about earlier, your effort, your attitude, how I show up and how I bring energy and how I'm able to be present with people. I'm not saying that's the only way, but that has helped me increase my awareness of things that are happening both internally and externally in my world.
Well, hey, I'll throw a challenge out to everybody that's listening to this broadcast. Try it.
Yeah.
Try it. And those of you that are going to freak out, they're going to lose your shit because you don't think you can do it. Try it on a Saturday. Ease into it. Try it on a Sunday morning. Ease into it. Don't blow your circuits, you phone people, but give it a shot, because I think it's a very powerful tool. But again, it goes back to finding your feet, right? I mean, you start your day with your feet on the ground, and you're working up towards that, right? You're starting that day with that being grounded, which leads into the third point that you talk about all the time, which is increasing focus, right? You're starting focused, right? Because these phones can get you, phones, technology, business, that shit can get you off the rails quick. And I'm a big believer, and I say this all the time to the CEOs that I work with, like, life balance is something, if you don't understand as a leader, as a CEO, you are going to be screwed at the end of this, because it will rock all of your world, not only your own, your family's life, your business life. Life balance is really important. And so that first 2 hours, dude, that's huge.
Yeah. One thing I would say too, with the challenge, and I stumbled upon this, and I realized we all make this mistake, but some of us don't realize or understand. When I started this, I tried to go in, like, I'd never done it, and I tried to go an hour the first couple of days of no phone, and it didn't work. And then I got frustrated, and I was like, I quit. So my challenge to add on to the challenge that you said is just go 10 minutes. Like, if you've never done it, or go 5, right? Go so small, it seems like laughable, right? And then once you've built that habit and you've done it for a week in a row, then increase it to 10 minutes, right? Like, if you don't have a workout routine, you would never say, well, I'm going to start working out 90 minutes every day. No, go walk around the neighborhood for 20 minutes, for 10 minutes, do that for a couple of weeks, and then add on to it. So I love the challenge. That's something I encourage with all my clients, but start so small, it seems laughable. Like, oh, 5 minutes, I can do 5 minutes. Okay, great. I want to stack so many small wins that we look back 90 days from now, we're like, oh my gosh, we've gone 3 months without looking at our phone. Then that's when it becomes a habit, because science says anywhere from 66 to 261 days to create a habit, not 7 days or 21 days. So start so small and just let it build on each other.
I love that. I love it. And, again, it's all about, I think that's a really great pathway to working on increasing your focus. Well, how do you know, one of the things that I'm sure officiating taught you, and again, is kind of dealing with setbacks, and especially dealing with rejection, because to your point, everybody hates you, and just a few people hate you a little less at the end of the night, right? Because you get all the blame. It doesn't matter how shitty the team is. Some way, somehow, they have to blame somebody. If you're a fan of that team, you're not going to say, "Oh, our team," it's the refs, whatever the case may be. I mean, you always get that crap. And you get it from every angle. It's a fine line. Now, D1's a little different than the NBA, right? The guys in the NBA say a hell of a lot more than the guys want at D1, and they know they have but I believe it's probably getting a little more mouthy out there today and what I can garner watching games. But, how do you deal with the setback and rejection part of that?
This episode of Todd-versations is brought to you by Merrifield. Better for you brands. Always rewarding. Find out how you can save time and be rewarded as you shop with Merrifield.com.
I think first thing, and back to the awareness, right, Todd, is understanding it's going to happen to everyone, right? Right. I think the first time it was explained to me is like when I was playing golf. I think it was an old golf coach I had 10, 15 years ago. He was like, Tiger Woods doesn't hit every shot perfect. What makes you think like you are? Like, why are you getting upset when you only hit, like 3 shots in a row that are good? And that's really like was a light bulb moment for me of like, oh yeah, like why am I getting upset? Why am I not? So now, with individuals I work with and teams, I'm like, adversity's coming, right? Setbacks are coming. Embrace it. Expect it. Right? Like it's going to come at some point, but don't be surprised, right? Like don't be surprised in sales if you get hung up on, right? Like don't be surprised if clients say no. Don't be surprised if, you get handed a shitty quota or a territory. Like, why are we surprised, right? And so that's why I said earlier, like your ability to overcome little losses throughout your day will dictate how you get to where you want to go. And so I got this from Ken Reviza, is a longtime sports psychologist. He passed away maybe a couple of years ago, but he was a longtime baseball guy. And this is something that I adopted in officiating and I use now with my clients, and I kind of put my own little spin on it, but it's recognize, regroup, and then refocus. So recognize, I've got a saying, Todd, so what, now what? Whether it's something that's going really well or something shitty's going on. Like, so what? Now what are you going to do? Right? Like, okay, the referee missed a call. What are you going to do? The prospect hung up on you. What are you going to do? Right? Like, get back over it. Get up. Like, stop sitting in your feelings. And so for me, I always knew there was going to be a shot clock at a game. So I would recognize I missed a call. Something didn't happen exactly like I wanted to. Look up at the top left corner. So what, now what? And then I had a physical release of just using my left hand and like wiping my lower back, because that was my way of like wiping away the play, like getting rid of whatever just happened. And then I was able to become more present and move on to the next play. And, you often hear that in business and sport, like get to the next play, but I don't think people explain why or explain how we can do that. But I often heard that, and it was me just asking, like, how do you get to the next play? Like, how quickly can you get to the next play? But that's really how fast and I think it starts with your self-talk, 100%. And then what are you going to do to get over it? Right. That's one of the questions I ask in an initial conversation with anyone is like, number one, tell me the biggest piece of adversity and how you overcame it. And then 2, how do you overcome adversity on a day-to-day basis? And I'll just sit back and listen. Like, I want to hear the language that they use. I want to understand their perspective. I want to understand in their answer, how they're explaining it. Are they accepting ownership, regardless if it was directly tied to them? Are they placing blame? That's going to give me a lot of insight into their mindset, the language, and how they perceive setbacks or obstacles. So those are a couple of different ways that I attack that.
Yeah. And it's a great point and very well said, but I think so many times in business, we listen to reply as opposed to listen to understand.
Yeah.
And as you go up the ladder, as you start managing people, right? I mean, I say it's super easy to manage a job description. It's a pain in the ass to manage people. Let's be honest, right? But when we get into business, sometimes we get so caught up in not doing the things we're actually talking about, that moment of pause, right? That getting into the being aware and becoming focused and taking that step back. It is okay. It is okay to breathe before you speak. And I tell people all the time, yes is just as good of an answer and no is just as good as an answer as giving somebody, a 500-word dissertation that ends up with the word no at the end of it, right? Yeah. And it's about being that more laser focused. I just love, God, you got me so fired up right now. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do this afternoon.
Here's something else you can add that I use with coaches and I still use today. So you're in a conversation with someone, right? And like you said, people are like how I used to be is like, I would wait for Todd's lips to stop moving. Wasn't listening to anything he said. I just wanted to wait till I saw your lips stop moving so I could tell you how great I was or respond. The next level, right, including empathy in that, but I would say to myself, to give myself a pause when you finish speaking and I'm listening intently to understand where you're coming from, I would say to myself, wait. And the acronym is, why am I talking? So that gave me a 2-second pause. Todd finishes his statement, his question, whatever. I say to myself, wait. That gives me that 1 or 2 seconds to process. Now I can respond and not react, right? Because reacting is quick, it's emotional. I'm not fully engaged,
Right.
But responding is my chance to pause, take a step back, ask myself, why am I talking? Okay, now, Todd, it seems like, you're kind of upset about this, or it sounds like from your experience, like, am I kind of getting that right, or am I off track? It's like,
right.
No, that's what I was saying. Like, you understand me. So yeah, I love that. Yeah. But saying wait really gave me that pause,
Right.
to take an extra second or two and understand and kind of get myself together so that I could respond to a coach.
Absolutely. Tell me about do boring better.
Yeah. So it's the other thing that's on my wristband. I soon realized, again, like I said earlier, success leaves clues. And I quickly realized that in order to get ahead, especially in officiating and sales, I had to really do the boring shit that from the outside and from initially seems boring, right? So in officiating, it was watching film, getting in the rule book, exercising, eating right, working on communication, like all the stuff that no one wants to do, right? Like in sales, it's practicing what you're going to say, listening to your calls, practicing with your sales coach if you even have one, investing in yourself. So to me, it's all the boring stuff from the outside that when you see it, you're like, well, that's boring. But it's doing the boring stuff. It doesn't become boring, but that's how you really get ahead, is you do all the little stuff that people often don't want to do, or they do it for a little bit of time and then they're like, this sucks, right? Like I don't want to do that anymore. And it really, it led me to, so I had an opportunity about 10 years ago. I was invited to try out for the NBA, and this is really where it stemmed from. And it's something I carry with me. I think at some point I'll probably get it engraved, or
you got to be at 86.
Yeah. So I carry it with me every day. So this is the jersey. When you get invited to try, I don't know if you still do, but you get sent a jersey, and this is essentially what you wear during the tryout. Obviously, I'm standing here talking to you today. I didn't get hired, didn't make it. But as I was reflecting, right, the awareness piece, and I had an honest conversation with myself, well, like, why do you think, Tommy, like that didn't work out? It came down to two things: limiting self-beliefs, self-talk, and preparation. And so that's one of the things I say now. I'm never going to get in another situation where I'm not prepared and the self-talk is not where it needs to be. And so to me, and that's something I often ask people, like, what's your 86? Like, what's your personal standard? What do you hold yourself accountable to? Because accountability is a one-way street.
Yeah.
No one can hold you accountable unless you hold yourself accountable. And so to me, what would have happened? And it's not like I sit back and think like, what if? But I know that if I was doing the boring stuff better 10 years ago, it would have changed the trajectory. And so I use it as a learning experience. I use it as, hey, let's not let what happened 10 years ago happen in the future. So to me, my 86, the thing that gets me fired up every day is the experience from, 9-10 years ago of something didn't happen, and that's okay. It led me to where I am today. But what can I do? How can I treat each day like the first day? How can I show up different? How can I change the room, any room I walk into, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, and know that I'm going to control those three things that we started this conversation with: my attitude, my confidence, and my effort. I control those. I can decide how I show up.
Well,
you got me fired up now.
I'm telling you, man, we're gonna Zoom high five. We're gonna start something.
Let's go.
But I wanted to get into the conversation about your 86 because I know what the story is, and I know how powerful, I know how impactful that story is to you. And one of the things that I think is so cool, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you about this topic is, is what is taught you, because I don't necessarily know that people put a lot of energy in reflection on the lessons they're being taught and I don't want to use the word failure in this instance because it's not the right word, but I don't know what better word to use. But when you have adversity or you have a situation, or you have a failure, you have a challenge, I don't necessarily know that people peel that back far enough to understand the lesson that you're being taught in that moment. And I believe that you're 86. You absolutely got that out of yourself. You absolutely self-reflected and went, oh, by the way, let me think back to why and what I can do tomorrow about that why.
Oh, I could probably make a pretty good assumption of why people don't. It's ego, right? Because you would have to put your ego aside, and the ego is there, and ego stands for everybody's got one. Your ego is there to keep you safe, right? Like that's how we're hardwired. We're not hardwired to be elite. We're not hardwired to jump out of buildings. We're not hardwired to start businesses. Like that takes a conscious decision to put your ego aside and realize people don't give a shit if you fail. They really don't at the end of the day. Nope. Right? Like if you really peeled things back, we are too worried about what other people think at the end of the day. That's why a lot of people don't start businesses or ask certain people out on dates or pick up the phone because they're worried about what other people think. But at the end of the day, like 30 seconds from now, like that person doesn't give a shit because they've got their own shit going on in their own world. And so I think the reflection part, Todd, like that you had mentioned, I think people are too worried about their ego and not allowing themselves to look like a failure. But to me, failure is growth. Failing is when you quit, right? So if I would have allowed that to stop all future growth, that would have been me failing. But a failure, I'm okay with failures because it's growth. You have to fail. If you're not willing to fail, you're never going to succeed. No success comes without failure. There's going to be failures. There's going to be little losses. So to me, it was my ability to put my ego aside and say, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? How can I become better? Right? Like, how can I use this to help others? Right? And so to me, it was putting the ego aside, realizing there's things I can take from it. And now how can I take what I learned in that experience, both on the court and then specifically the 86, and now how can I help others with that? Because that's what it's all about. It's not about me. It's how can I take this to help others? And then the domino effect from that, right? So I help an individual, I start coaching Todd, then Todd becomes a better dad, a better husband, a better business owner. That's a ripple effect. So every person I work with, like, yes, I care about that person, but I'm more worried about like, how are they going to then go out and change others around them? That's where I really get fired up. Yeah, it's working with the individual too, but knowing how many other people they can possibly touch and help. And so that's why I get fired up.
I love it. Something that you've written, and I think it's just, and I'm stoked right now that I've got it in front of me to be able to remember it. But what to ask yourself, and the three things that you put down there: are you willing to hold yourself accountable, right? And that you want Tommy to do all the heavy lifting, give you all the answers, isn't going to happen, or you or anybody else. It's going to be there's no magic. There's no Uno card that you drop down that just solves the problem, right? And are you willing to commit to that daily process? And I think those are three really powerful things. When I think about everything we've talked about, to me, it's like a nice reflection point at this moment of conversation. Like, yeah, this is all great, but ultimately, you got to either want to step up or step back, right? There's two choices in all this. If you want to embrace this, you got to ask yourself those hard questions. Am I going to hold myself accountable? What does that feel like? And do I just want somebody to make me feel good? And that's all it's going to take. That kind of, it's like these things, right? You get a thumbs up, somebody likes your post, this and that. We get that dopamine, that self-gratification that we've done fucking nothing because we said we're cooking steak on the barbecue this weekend, right? Oh my God, 100 people liked it. Oh, I'm so great. I'm Julia Child now. And that's where I say in a lot of ways, we're emotionally ill prepared to deal with what comes at us so rapidly. But again, it's about that daily process. It's about waking up, putting your feet on the ground. And I think it's just super, super powerful. So I appreciate it. I'm glad I was able to throw that out there because I think it's a nice summation of what you really got to do. Like, again, it's all the bells and whistles, call them what you want, but it's about the work, man. You got to be able to put the work in. It's not that hard. It's like inspiring somebody. It's not that hard to say good morning to somebody, right? It only becomes hard if that inner bitch starts to take over, that voice that wants to take a step forward. That voice that wants to pull you back is tough to overcome sometimes.
Yeah. And I think, it goes back to the ego, Todd, right? Like
Yeah.
it's understanding what it's there for and there to protect us, but we are able to make that choice. We are able, like one of the last things I always say in like an initial conversation is kind of what you said. I'm like, look, the best coaches ask the best questions. So you're going to come up with the answers on your own. I'm not going to give you the answers, and you're going to have to commit, because a lot of people are interested in getting better, but not a lot of people are committed, because there's a big
Right.
difference between being interested, but then knowing it's time to, and I'm not saying you need to grind 90 hours a week and do this and that, but there comes a point in time when what are you going to commit to every single day, every
Yeah.
single week, every single month? But if you're not willing to put in that work and realize that you don't have all the answers, I don't have all the answers, that it's going to take some self-reflection. It's going to take vulnerability to realize I'm going to have to be wrong at times, and that's okay.
Yeah. I want to ask a question. I'll put your dad hat on for a minute, right? Because I think this is just so killer. As a parent, and being who you are today, who you've created yourself to be, what you believe in, and your trajectory and your path that you're on. What have you seen with your own kids, based upon kind of who you are and what you're bringing to the table and what they're getting fed every day, emotionally, spiritually, examples, leadership skills, all that stuff. What are you seeing with your kids?
So one thing that I do that is probably a little abnormal, but there's about 6 or 7 daily affirmations that I now make my 2-year-old say to me every morning and every night. So when we wake up, at things like I'm strong, I'm confident, I'm kind, I'm patient, I can do it. You say process to my daughter and she'll say over outcome, like she'll finish the phrase, and then always finish. So that's what I'm instilling in her. Like, so that's how we kind of start and end days. There's a great book out there for parents, probably more so if you've got younger kids, but it's called the Me Epidemic. One of my clients recommended it, and I can't highly recommend it enough. But essentially, it's at the end of the day, all kids are looking for 2 things: a sense of belonging and a sense of significance. Like they want to feel like they're doing something. And so, they talk about this thing of, and again, awareness, things we talk about, being where your feet are. So, it talks about in the book taking 10 minutes. I think the author calls it body, mind, and soul time. So it's putting the phone away, letting the kid decide, what do you want to do? And it doesn't seem like a lot, but like 10 minutes, no phone, no TV, like just one-on-one time, like, and doing that maybe twice a day, I've noticed has made a big difference in just like the connection and, little things like, hey, do you want to do this? And she's like, no, I want to do this. Okay, great. As long as she's not putting herself in like true danger,
Sure.
like, okay, hey, you want to do whatever, like, I'm all for it. You want to brush your teeth before you put your shoes, like, I don't care. Like, yeah, that's great. Like, she feels a sense of belonging. But so I really think just connecting with people, because, a lot of times I think we're physically with people, but emotionally we're somewhere else.
Right on.
Mentally we're somewhere else. So I'm very cognizant of that. I'm very aware. Do I slip up every time or from time to time? Absolutely. But I think just becoming aware of that and really honing in on increasing and changing her self-talk from a young age, I think is going to set her. I mean, gosh, I'm like, if somebody was telling me this when I was 2, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I'm like, I would have loved to have known this 35 years ago. So I think really just helping dictate her self-talk, and understanding that she controls a lot more than outside forces. But those are just 2 small examples of things I'm, as a dad, where I think a lot of the things we talked about today directly correlate to being a dad as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's important. I think it's important that the folks that are listening that have kids take that moment of all that we've talked about and recognize that they can have that amazing influence with young people today and put some really good, strong foundation down of self-confidence and being aware, and being focused and, learning the difference in a lot of ways between, ego and confidence. There's a big difference between the two.
100%.
And I think it's really important that we start to empower the youth today. And I say it all the time, whether it's teaching kids to eat better, whether it's teaching kids to be smart, all these different things are so important. That's how we're going to make changes in this world. We're too old and, in my generation, we're too stupid to make changes that we need to make, right? If we don't start empowering the kids downstream, everything we think needs to happen isn't going to get done.
Right.
So I think it's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I know
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
didn't want to get too much into the whole personal zip code, but I don't
No, it's all good.
It's super good. I got to ask a couple basketball questions. Let's throw a few of these out on the table.
Let's do it.
Let's just get into some of the. When I was a kid, I was in high school. I used to referee basketball, youth basketball. I had a ton of fun doing it. I coach high school basketball. It's something I've dealt with for a long time. A kid played ball, the whole 9 yards. But even coaching third, fourth, fifth grade kids, the parents are just so fucked up, and you're having to deal with this all the time. And you're in there with the biggest arenas that are holding basketball are 18,000. Which you've been in front of, unless you've been in the Final Four, which is 50,000, whatever they're having, especially if they're playing in the Indy. Yeah. How'd you deal with that in the beginning? Because one of the things I always, there's some things that are going to be said that sometimes you have to take somewhat personally, like it's offensive, it hurts your feeling. How'd you get over that?
I think a mentor once told me officiating was not a place to get your needs met. Right. Like it was just like, So I think that really helped me. It short of like wanting to harm my wife or two kids, like there's nothing you can say that is going to get me fired up. Right. So I think just like being in that environment for so many years has almost made me like numb to, which I think is turned into a positive, like criticism or, critiques. Like it literally falls on deaf ears. Because I'm like, what's really like going on in your world that a basketball game is going to allow your blood pressure to soar that much and yell at someone that you have like no idea. And then not to mention, this game has zero effect on your livelihood, like zero. Like if anyone should yell, it should be like the owner of a team who like that potentially could affect their livelihood.
Yeah.
But outside of that, fan is short for fanatic. So I don't think I have some like magic spell or magic like cure for that. I think it's just like the repetition and doing it for 17 years, 10 years at the it's just like it
focus, baby. It's focus.
It's funny. I would there would be things like here and there that you would hear that were actually like kind of funny and like because you kind of hear the same like crap about referees and it just like but it's like you would hear like things like and like nothing's coming to mind, but there would be like every once in a while and I'd have to turn around and be like, that's pretty good. Like I hear the same shit every night, but like I got to give you credit. Like that's pretty good, right? Or like my favorite was like call it both ways, and I'm like, you don't want me to call fouls on your team too? Like, so why are you saying that? Like you only want me to call fouls on them, and they're like, oh yeah, no, you're right. So it's I think you have to understand like pick and choose. I think when I was younger, I was like more wanting to like get involved with fans and like interact, but like that's a slippery slope, especially now with like cell phones. And I've had friends who've gotten in trouble because they think they're saying something, kind of off the record or off cuff, but somebody's in the front row recording it, and then now it's on Twitter. So that was something I was conscious of too, but never, even though you and I are kind of going back with playful language, like never on the court, because I was like, I never wanted to be a headache for my supervisor, the guy that hired me, that put his neck on the line with the conferences. So I never wanted him to have to get a phone call because he was dealing with enough shit of like, hey, this is what Tommy said at the game, right? So again, I had fun with fans here and there. You go back to certain schools and kind of interact with those people. But yeah, for the most part, it was just like doing it for so long is like I didn't even like I was like a racehorse. I was able to just to really like block it out and
plug them in
on what I do.
Who was the most chatty fun coach that you got to
Huggins was at West Virginia, like but he's one of those guys like and I don't mean this like in a like he's like a man's man in a way, like he'll give it to you but like he can take it too, but you better be right and like not like don't open your mouth for the sake of opening your mouth, right? There was something I started to do the last couple of years, and this goes back to the empathy part, but I would watch press conferences and read like transcripts of their meetings with the media leading up to the game that I was going to work, right? Because they're essentially saying like Todd's not getting back on defense during practice, our team's struggling with this and this. So then in a game, when something like a heated moment or something came up, I would break the ice and be like, hey, is Todd still not getting back on defense? And completely just lowers their defense mechanism because they're like, number one, they're like, how the hell do you know that? And number two, like, I expected you to come over here and defend the shitty call that you just made.
Yeah.
And you completely already been. So it just completely throws them off kilter. But that was a way for me to connect with them too, of like, hey, you've been on the road for the last 2 weeks, like, how are things? And so it was just like a little way I learned to kind of get in their head and kind of play mind games with them.
Who was the most chippiest one you've had out there? Who's one that just and you don't have to say if you don't want. I can put in spot.
I don't care.
There's games like, fuck, this is going to be a rough day. Just because some of these coaches love to just yell and love to get involved.
I say Jamie Dixon, who's at TCU, he always had something to say, every time down the court. It's like, I'm not that bad where like every time down the court, you need to say stuff. And then there's certain guys like Mike Young, who's now at Virginia Tech, or Bob McKillop, who's at Davidson, guys like that, who might only say 2 or 3 things during the whole game. Like, you knew when they open their mouth to ask a question or say something, it's like, I don't even need to let them finish. It's like, I missed the call. Like, if you're saying something to me, like, you have so much credibility with me because you're only talking when it's something like meaningful. Like, I'm going to give you an ear. Guys like Buzz Williams, who's at Texas A&M now. Like, there's just certain guys that were like really chippy, and not even like in a bad way, just like kind of like a nagging, like every time down the court. And they want to be like a smart ass, but then when you're a smart ass, it's like they're like, why are you doing that? It's like, you just did that. Like, are we not equals here? Like, what's going on? So those are a couple of guys that come to mind. But again, going back to the empathy, you just realize like they either must have like a shitty AD, they might not have a good like home life, and they're like, this is just their release point. So it was never personal until they made it personal, but it was never personal.
Yeah, I love it. You talked about working with the Olympic team a little bit, and that had to be a lot of fun because that is, you work, look, over your career in D1, you've seen a lot of really great basketball players. You've seen some ones that have gone to the NBA. You probably see some ones that people don't know that were amazing ball players. It's generally the case. There's a lot of no names that are damn good. But when you look at those guys and that blended team together from all different aspects of the game, that had to be quite an experience, but it also had to be completely different than that D1 experience because these guys are now, pros, they're paid, they're making fat cash. The attitude changes, the whole 9 yards. The drive is still there because you touched on that earlier, but it had to be a whole different conversation with some of these guys.
Yeah, it was. So a couple of things that stand out there. I think number one, though, I think this is a really important message for all your listeners that changed my perspective of, I always had a different view of athletes from an officiating standpoint because like I never looked at celebrities or athletes like most people do because to me they're just people that happen to do something. But this was really what cemented it for me. So in a normal like college season, we don't have any interaction with the players and coaches, like zero. And even in the summer, you might bump into them at like an AAU camp, but it's not like you're going out to dinner or anything like that. USA basketball is a little bit different because in a FIBA, like in an international competition, you never can referee your country. But in all the exhibition games and like practices and tryouts, when I say we, like the American USA refs, that's all they have do it because like we invented the sport. We're the best players and the best referees. So the caveat to the story I'm about to tell is like for exhibitions and all the training, like there is some interaction with players, like a very small amount, but way more than a normal college season. So my first, I'd been in Division I a couple of years, zero experience with NBA players. So like I'm calling all my buddies who are NBA referees, back in 2012. I'm like, all right, like, the roster, like, tell me what to expect. What am I getting myself into? And for your listeners, Todd, so that 2012 team, the starting lineup was Kobe, LeBron, Carmelo, Chris Paul, and Tyson Chandler. And the second five, and this is when they were all still on the OKC Thunder, Durant, Westbrook, Harden, Darren Williams, and Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin got hurt, so they brought in Anthony Davis, who just got drafted number 1 overall. And then the 11th and 12th man were Andre Iguodala and Kevin Love. So, I mean, arguably 6 or 7 future Hall of Famers. And so I'm going from, small Division I, right, to Olympic team, right? Like quite a jump in talent and everything else. But the first story I want to share is we had just ended the first practice that I had with the team, and we're underneath the stadium in the locker room having lunch. And, I'm sitting there with one of the other referees, and it's me and this other referee, Kobe, LeBron, Kevin Love, Chris Paul. There's like 6 or 7 players. And it really struck me. These guys are the same age as me. They're talking about the same shit that my friends talk about. They just make $20 million a year. That's the only difference. They're arguing about where they're going to sit on the plane to London for the Olympics. And they're talking about like all this other stuff. And I'm like, this is what me and my friends talk about. And from that moment, I had always been like that with officiating, but I never put celebrities and athletes on pedestals. Like they still have trouble with their families. They still go to Starbucks. They watch Netflix. They have to deal with all the same shit we do. They just get paid to play a sport. So I never put, and I translate that in the business world. I don't care what 3 letters come after your name. Like you're still a human being. Like I don't care if you're the CEO or you're the worker in the warehouse. I don't treat you any different. I treat every single person the exact same, regardless if you can help me or not. It doesn't matter. That's just how I was raised, and that's how I'm a big believer in you. Whether it's the person at the front desk or the person in the corner office, you treat everyone the same. And so that really cemented like not putting athletes on pedestals and treating everyone the same. But the other thing, a story I'll share with you, that's really when I understood how serious, especially Kobe, took practice. And that's really what opened my eyes that like these guys treat practice like it's game 7. Now, not everyone did, but Kobe especially was treating this like it was game 7 of the NBA finals. And it was a practice before an exhibition game. And that's really what I realized, like these guys, if you're committed, right, not interested, but if you're committed to your craft, you are going to like treat practice like it's the end of the world, like it's the last thing you're going to do. And that's how he approached it. Like that really left a mark on me with, hey, these guys take practice a lot more serious than I think a lot of other individuals would.
Oh, I'm sure of that. Well, like you say, you perform better when you think better, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Yeah, I had to admit, I agree with you. I've never really in my life got overly starstruck by very much, except I was one time when I was a kid. I lived in the same same town as John Wayne did, the actor. Okay. And I was a little kid. I was in the drugstore. I don't know how old I was, still in elementary school. And he was in the drugstore with his daughter. And I walked up to him. He was at least 15, maybe 16 feet tall. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And my dad was like, go shake his hand. And I was such a chicken shit. I was just mesmerized. And that's the first, I think probably the in all my years, and man, I met a lot of really cool people. All my years, that's probably the one that stands out to me as the one that's like, all right, I'm going to put you right there. I mean, he was unbelievable. And he looked right down at me and he goes, hello. And I just froze. I didn't know what to do. I ran back to my dad. He's like, oh my God, come on, kid.
What are you doing?
I love it. I love it.
That's awesome.
But, shifting gears a little bit, because, I leaned into this at the beginning, what we talked about inspiration. Who inspires you?
Yeah, I would, the short answer is my parents, right? Like just the work ethic and everything they instilled in me. And I tell people too, right? Like, we've talked a little bit about like motivation and stuff today. I'm not a big believer in external motivation, right? Because I think it's like coffee, right? There's a reason I make a pot every morning. It's because it lasts about 2 or 3 hours, and then I got to go get some the next day. I think if you want to make real change in your life, you've got to find it within. But that's that. To me, my parents and just like what they provided in their mindset and how to approach situations and how to think for yourself. And I think that's the big thing, like not teaching me what to think, but how to think. And that's something I take with me in my coaching today is like, I never want to be the inner voice for any of my clients. I want them to develop for themselves so that after we leave our interaction, they're able to think for themselves and think on their own. And so, yeah, the short answer is definitely my parents.
I love it. It's great. Great answer. Dude. Thank you very much. All right.
Yeah.
I got to shift gears with you now. Let's shift a little bit. We're taking a whole different direction. You ready? We're going to do a little trivia. We're going to play a little TLC trivia. We're going to put you in the hot seat right now, baby.
Let's
go.
For
cash and prizes.
Cash and prizes. I'll take door number 2.
Great. Well, you ain't playing for shit. So get your hopes down. All right, here we go. First question: dog or a cat?
Dogs only. I'm allergic to cats.
Well, right. That's the only answer. Anyways. What country has competed in the most times in the Summer Olympics and has never won a medal?
Oh, Like team sports or individual or anything?
Yeah, period. No, they have not ever won any kind of medal in the Summer Olympics. They've been in the Olympics the most and have never won.
Gosh,
I know.
I
Liechtenstein. Why aren't you leaning into Liechtenstein?
was trying to think of like cold countries.
Well, I'm pretty sure that you got one when that was Liechtenstein.
Yeah. So that's what was going through my head.
All right. I'll dial it down here. What's the national sport of Canada?
I think hockey would be too obvious, so I'm going to say curling.
Good. You know what? I like that. Curling. Nice. You're wrong. It's lacrosse.
Okay.
It's lacrosse.
Oh, okay.
But curling would have been a good guess. I like that. You know,
All
I'm
right.
going to get. You know what? It's not
Half a
right, but
point.
I'm going to give you that one as being correct.
Okay. All right.
All right. Here's one for you. Alive or dead? Who would you like to have dinner with?
See, this is another thing. I'm not like impressed by people, but if I had to pick one person, Larry David.
Oh, that'd be a great dinner.
Yeah.
That would be a lot of fun.
And probably after 20 minutes, just knowing his personality, he'd be like, "Okay, this was great. I'll see you later."
Yeah, you're out. Nice talking to you. Go motivate somebody
this
else.
Is great. Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to.
But
yeah, well,
I told my wife, I'm like, I think Larry David might be the only person. It's just because I think that's kind of who I'm becoming as I get older anyway.
I love it.
So, yeah, but other than that, I don't.
But in all fairness, you're not, you're a little more Larry David on crack than you are Larry David just being Larry David. Let's be honest. You got a little more fire. I'm not dissing him in any way, but I'll just face it. Yeah. There's a little more fire. There's a little more fire under your sneakers than a lot of people have. Yeah, no doubt. Dude, this has been so much fun. It really has. And I appreciate you tremendously. I just have one final question for you.
Yes, sir.
This chat has been everything I'd hoped for, right? It's about positivity. It's about uplifting. It's about putting your feet on the ground and understanding why they're connected and all that's, and how that all changes and works to improve our path. And I think you've illustrated brilliantly what it takes for us to do some of these things, but I also think you illustrated the things that perhaps we take for granted every day that we can make a difference about. And so my final question to you is this, if you had the ability to empower people with just call it one superpower, with just one thing, what would it be?
I think I'd probably go back to kind of the thing we've touched on is just having more empathy, because I think with that, I think that can trickle into so many other things. Just always understanding everyone's going through something, and you never know what someone's going through. But right. I just think if everyone had more empathy as a whole, I think that would. And then I think a close second, you didn't ask me for two, but I don't care at this point, so I'll give you
Take
two.
six. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I think if people took more ownership for where they are in life, good or bad, right? Yeah. I think so often, in a great book I would recommend to your listeners, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL.
Jocko's the real deal.
Yeah, just taking more ownership for everything, right? Like you and I are where we are in our life because of the decisions we've made, because of the choices. Nobody else, like no one else. And I think so often, whether it's ego, whether it's pride, we're so quick to blame others for where we are. And I didn't get a shot at this, or I didn't get this opportunity, or I didn't so what, now what? You know what I mean?
Right.
So have a little more empathy and take a little bit more individual ownership. And it's nobody else's fault. It's nobody else's problem. Like sack up and figure some shit out, right? Like it's not always going to be unicorns and rainbows, and that's okay.
Right.
But what are you going to do next? Right? Like how are you going to show up right now, an hour from now? What are you going to do right now? Because that's really the only thing we can control is what we're going to do in this given moment. So yeah, empathy and personal ownership in our decisions.
I love it. Dude, this has been so killer. I have enjoyed this tremendously. Likewise. I mean, just as you're a phenomenal guest. I was fired up for this. I've been looking forward to this. Your words, I hope people take to heart. I hope people listen to what you have to say and take that moment of pause and figure out where their feet are. And figure out what their day is about, and that moment of reflection. And I'm get on the website, thinkbetterperformbetter.com. Thank you. Yep. Get on there. reach out to Tommy, get him into your office, get him in front of your team, spend some time learning how to drive success, right? From inside, right? Don't worry so much about what's in the box in the warehouse. Worry about what's inside your heart, what your path is, where your company's path is going, and what example you're giving. Again, you're going to perform better when you think better. Brother, I can't thank you enough. Come back, please. Open invitation.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. I love this discussion. And like I said before, anytime I can talk about, how to develop a stronger mindset and how to think better, I'm all on board. So I appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation.
Dude, it's actually my pleasure. Folks, Tommy Short, go check him out. I'm telling you, it'll be worthwhile. I'm fired up. I don't know what the hell my afternoon's going to be, but I am fired up right now.
Let's get after it.
I love it. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out and watching and listening and being a part of this audience. We appreciate you every day. Thank you so much for making season 2 a possibility. This is what it's about. Let's uplift. Let's inspire, right? I say it all the time. Go inspire somebody. It is not hard to do. A hello is a great place to start. Go meet your neighbor. If you don't know who they are, go knock on their damn door. They're not going to be pissed off at you. Say hello, extend a hand. Let's make a difference in this planet by using our hearts and our minds in a positive way and uplift this community. It's what it's all about. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. We'll see you soon. Don't forget to check out Todd Bits. Tommy's coming back. He guaranteed it. I promise you all have him back. And take care of each other. Appreciate it. See you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.